Conor, that I love Formula One.
You do, yes.
Yeah, and I've been talking about it a little bit when we were talking about Hamilton. Right now, actually, Hamilton, you probably heard that he's the kind of the best driver in the history, the most wins. He's got
Hmm.
7 world titles, and he's
Hmm.
still driving. So that's quite incredible. But the last weekend was just heartbreaking.
Hmm.
What happened? There was a big accident in Bahrain when
Hmm.
Roman Grosjean almost kind of lost his life. And I was rewatching the footage today, and he was actually talking about it. It's kind of incredible how much has have changed in Formula One. You maybe watched the movie Rush,
Yeah, I liked it.
where Niki Lauda and
Hmm.
James Hunt,
Hmm.
they kind of go head to head in the 70s, and there's essentially kind of shown the accident of Niki Lauda that kind of changed his mind, and then the changes start coming to the Formula One as a sport to make the sport a little bit safer. And a few years ago, they introduced something called Halo,
Yeah,
which is essentially like a big kind of part of protection around the driver's head.
yeah,
And even Roman Grosjean said, in the interviews, he was not a big supporter of it at the beginning because it kind of like it's something in your like peripheral vision. It's maybe not
yeah.
great, but this is what actually saved his life. And when you see actually him coming out of flames, it's like a miracle. It's like you know you didn't expect that this will happen. I was watching the footage. When I was kind of watching the highlights of the Formula One. So I knew he survived, but when I watched what actually happened, this was massive. This was like I think a few years ago we would be talking about rest in peace, Roman Grosjean.
Hmm.
And thanks to the all the changes that happened, this sport. I know that there are many people who tune in to Formula One just to watch. Maybe they're gonna crash or something, and there's gonna be something spectacular. And for the sheer excitement, okay, it's great. But the first of all, it's like the safety of the driver, and you see all those drivers because they stopped the race. They were actually watching the screens, and everyone was kind of like terrified. What is happening? People in the garage, the mechanics, they couldn't do anything. They're just like,
Yeah.
we've not seen anything like this. So Roman Grosjean has survived, which is incredible. He came back to the circuit a few days. He got burned hands. He got like bandages
Yeah,
over
yeah.
his hands, and it was like, you know, we thought that Formula One is kind of like, oh, is this one of the boring sports, but it isn't.
Have you seen the interview that he gave with Sky Sports that Roman gave with Sky Sports afterwards?
No, no.
Where he talks about the actual like what went, how the sort of moment to moment went.
I think I watched the interview, but it was on Channel 4, so
Okay, okay, cool. I seen it through Sky Sports on Twitter. They
and he's talking essentially point after point, like what his thoughts are, how he's
yes,
like he's
yeah,
trying to pull his right leg
yeah.
out. He's stuck, and it's like it's just like milliseconds, and he's analyzing everything.
Hmm.
Incredible.
Well, that's what's so wild about it, right? Is that the suits that they wear can withstand up to 850 degrees Celsius for 35 seconds, and he was out of the car in about 29 seconds, I think. So he's cutting it fine, that's for sure. But as he tells the story, it seems like he sat in that car for hours. It
Yeah,
feels, and I couldn't help but think when he was retelling it, I was like, someone in Hollywood is writing this script right now. They
absolutely.
absolutely are, because like he give death a name. Did you see that?
No.
Yeah, I can't remember the name he give it. It's a French word he give it, I think. But he says that like he accepted death when he was sitting in the car. He just was like, "All right, this is it." And he says that death was there, and he give it a name. He doesn't know why. He doesn't know why he give it a name. He doesn't know why he like personified it, but he did. And then he started thinking of other things. And one of the last things that came to his mind actually was his children. And it was his children where he said, okay, no, I'm not going to die at this point. I got to get myself out. I'm going to at least try to get myself out. So he got his way out of the thing. And like his shoe was stuck. So he had to get his foot out of his shoe. And that's what allowed him to get out. And how as he climbed up over the top of it, it was his hands that were burning. And he said that like at that moment, one of the, I assume, the safety team, he does
one of the
his name in
doctors
it.
actually was next to him, pulling him out from.
He says he put his hand on his shoulder, and it was like that was the exact moment where I was like, oh, I've made it. Like, that's a person. There's a person touching me. Like, I'm alive and I've made it. Because up until that point, it was like, I don't really know. I could be dead, or like this could be part of it all. Like, well, he says as soon as someone put his hand on his shoulder, he's like, he was dead. And he says, like, you know, like they were talking to him in a very, very serious manner, you know, like sit down, you know. And he was like, you could tell it was also serious. And he turned around, he was like, just talk to me normally, you know, because he was like. And that's at the point then when the doctor was like, oh, we're okay. Like everything's actually okay, because he's being cheeky back to me, like in his kind of his true fashion, I guess. The only question I have about it, because I haven't actually seen the crash itself, like how did the crash happen? Was it obviously his fault? Was it poor driving? Was it someone else's fault? I assume you've seen it happen.
Yeah, it was. It's kind of. I don't want to be playing, you know, like blaming game. Whose kind of fault was that? It was one of those racing accidents when, you know, you have two drivers, like multiple drivers, because it was just the beginning of the race. So everyone's bunched up and everyone's trying to make up, you know, the time, the space, and try to kind of, you know, and Roman, what was he doing? He was essentially crossing the line in front of another driver. So that car from that he was kind of crossing the line just tipped his wheel, and he lost the balance of the car, and he just smashed into a barrier, and the car was in two pieces. Like if you watch it, it's in two pieces. There's essentially a rear of it, and there's a front of it, and there was a big ball of fire, and it was just incredible. Because as long as I've been watching Formula One, I've seen some crashes, you know. Mm-hmm. I remember kind of vaguely Robert Kubica was like Polish driver driving like 15 years ago for BMW. He had a horrible crash in Australia, and no one thought he's gonna kind of make it, but he came out fine, you know, like it was like nothing happened to him. So watching this, I was like, this is incredible. Like, this is like from a movie, essentially, you know. And when the car kind of, in every movie, and the car kind of like goes off the street, it suddenly just goes into flames. This only happens in the movies, and this happened in the real life, and just was incredible. I think they will be investigating the safety as well, like why the fire broke out so quickly and so heavily. But I think the final thing is to say, you know, we all love following stories, and I think the stories that have happy ending, they're just so incredible, so encouraging. And, you know, when life brings you those stories, it's just the best. And I enjoy, that's why I watch. Sometimes those races are a little bit boring. Sometimes, you know, they are just end fantastically. This season has been unique, incredible. And this, I would not probably want to watch it again, but I'm so happy that he's alive, you know.
I think to tie it all back to movies, that, you know, someone will write a script and try to have this made into a movie. But in the meantime, go and watch Le Mans 66. Yeah.
And that's our tie-in to the movie podcast that starts now.
Yeah.
You ready?
I was born ready.
Hello and welcome to the Blockbusters. This is a podcast about the wonderful world of cinema and TV. This is a podcast about movies and shows we love, no matter how big, no matter how small. My name is Rado, a Formula One lover forever, for life. And I'm here with Conor Boyle, and we're going to be talking about movies, TV series, and some other stuff. No more Formula One from now on. The show today, we have quite a few things to discuss, Conor, right?
Yeah, it's going to be another one of those 72-hour long episodes that we managed to trim down into about, 5 hours or so.
5 hours or so. You can listen in bits and chunks if you prefer to. So we're gonna be talking about news. There's been not that many news, but in terms of what actually the news means, it's quite significant for the cinema and for everyone involved in the business. So that's going to be first part of our show. We're going to briefly discuss what have we been watching recently. My list is a little bit longer than Conor's, but I won't be dwelling on that too long. And we have some reviews today. So we have Citizen Kane and Mank double bill, but we're also going to be talking about 2 episodes of Mandalorian episode, actually chapter 13 and chapter 14. But don't I get confused with all that stuff, and we'll leave it to the end because there will be some spoilers, obviously, once we discuss this. First of all, I wanted to say thank you for everyone who's joined us and listening. Please, if you haven't subscribed, just click subscribe, give us a rating, recommend it to your friends, to your enemies, and we can check our website for all the episodes. And this is theblockbusters.net.
Yes.
And that's been put online by Conor himself, and he also designed the artwork. And he's the talented one. I am the beautiful one.
I show up drunk, like literally right now, every week.
And he also does show up drunk from time to time. But
Irish.
This is all in the theme of this episode because, like I said, we're gonna be discussing Mank and everyone drank over there back in the 30s in Hollywood. So are we. No, actually, he's not that drunk.
No,
he's just high on paracetamol. Okay, Conor, big news. When we heard that news, you texted me, it's going to be a long episode. And, I read this news and I kind of first of all said to myself, this is not something that is relevant to us in the UK. But very kind of quickly, I started kind of digging into it and talking to my friends or talking within this household as well, which is also involved in the cinema. I love cinema. And what are we actually talking about? So the news broke that Warner Bros., the company that's been very supportive to the cinema industry in the COVID, so they kind of waited out and gave us Tenet to be released in the cinemas. Last kind of 2 weeks have said they will be releasing still this year the Wonder Woman in 1984. At the same time they will be releasing this movie at HBO Max. But a few days later they said they will debut 17 films that were due to be released in the cinemas in 2021 on HBO Max, the same time as they will be released in the theaters. And that's kind of a big statement and a big move from that company. We obviously had situations with Disney saying Mulan's going to be playing. We're not going to be putting it in the cinemas. We're just going to sell it. We don't know the exact numbers, but we kind of assume that since they have not followed up with that kind of situation, they probably are going to wait for the biggest titles like Black Widow to be released to the cinemas. We had Universal releasing Trolls 2 directly onto premium VOD. But right now, what's happening is essentially 17 movies that were meant to kind of slowly come to the cinemas in 2021 for the streaming service, for anyone who's subscribed to the streaming service HBO Max in the US, because that's what actually we are talking about. HBO Max doesn't exist anywhere else, right?
It doesn't, but they have said that they want to expand it to other regions in 2021, and they're currently working to make that happen. So
yeah, and they have right now a big titles to lure people in, because I think why the numbers for HBO Max were not that great and they think they were expecting bigger numbers is one of the reasons is probably they don't have those big new titles. Because I think what a lot of people want to subscribe to is essentially have new content coming through. You might have a lot of old stuff, but the new title is going to be the kind of crucial one. So 17 titles. This includes The Matrix for Denis Villeneuve's Dune. We're going to have the Suicide Squad, the new Suicide Squad. We're going to have, what other films? Godzilla vs. Kong, Tom and Jerry. That's going to be like the new kind of version of Tom and Jerry. Mortal Kombat. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, Space Jam: A New Legacy, and a few other films on this list. So obviously this is a big talking point because, I mean, I'm just going to quickly describe how it's going to work. The film's going to appear on the HBO Max for 30 days, for a month, and it's going to be available in the cinemas in the same time. After the 30 days, movie's going to be keep playing in the theaters to have the window, essentially, for like whatever theatrical window they have, like 90 days, right? And after that time, you'll be able to go to iTunes, to Google Store, to whatever place you're buying the movies from and buy it from there. And I think they said also in that statement, Warner Bros. Said that this is a temporary measurement for 2021. So they're not going to be trying this in 2022. This is just because the COVID is right now. We want to release stuff. And I think this is rubbish, but I want to hear your thoughts, first of all, because I've been talking too long.
I think there's a lot of context that goes into this story. I think when you initially see it, it is very like, oh no, this is not a good bit of news for cinemas. But I think there is a lot of context to it. Some of it you described there with the sort of like, it's only on HBO Max for 30 days and then it's back, it's remains in the cinema for the typical 90-day window, and then it's on iTunes and everything. That's one piece of it. I think you have to kind of go back as well and look at like, well, what is HBO Max? And it's not even the only HBO streaming service. They're like, it's one of the HBO streaming services, and HBO were purchased by Time Warner, who own Warner Brothers. I think that's the way that kind of like corporate system is, or corporate structure. So, and HBO has always been like a premium service in the States, in the United States, is that you couldn't just get HBO on its own. You had to have a cable subscription that you paid for, and then you had to pay for HBO on top of that. So for us here, it's very much like you can have a Sky package, but then you have to pay extra for Sky movies, or you can have Virgin, like a Virgin package, but you have to pay extra for Virgin movies, or something like that. That's a closer sort of comparison to how it works. So HBO has always been like the premium service, which meant that it naturally had a smaller audience, because it was quite a big payment to get HBO, to be able to watch HBO. But and then they typically would have also released a lot less content and TV shows, which meant that it was always a higher quality. So it's why we always kind of have that like, you know, brilliant like quality of show that comes from HBO. And then there's also it also is like a bit of a cultural touchstone as well, with like their shows typically tended to release on a Sunday night, so it was Sunday night HBO was a thing in the States. So a lot of that is kind of folded into this here, where they have released this new service under Time Warner Brothers, where they've got HBO Max, which is HBO content plus a lot of other content as well from other services. So I know they bought the rights to things like The Big Bang Theory, for example, and that generated some conversation of like, well, that's not really what people think about HBO. Like HBO was always like a beacon of quality, and then when you're putting on shows that are typically not highly regarded, like
but very popular
Theory, but
very popular, yeah,
absolutely, yeah, but critically not well regarded, that it kind of went, oh well, this is a very weird sort of sort of system that they've got going on here. But what then kind of complicates it further is that compared to most of the services, this HBO Max is $16 a month. Mm-hmm. Compare that to Disney Plus, which is $6 a month.
Yeah.
£6 a month, I think, here in the UK. And I assume that if HBO Max was to release in other regions, it's going to follow a similar pricing structure, and that it's going to be really, really, it's going to be £15 to £20 per month to subscribe to. And then, as you said, they have not got a lot of big new titles that are there. All of the other HBO stuff is going to come to it, but is that enough to convince people to kind of like cable cut or to subscribe to like £16 a month? Like, what was that one we watched earlier in the year that we both loved?
Watchmen?
Watchmen's one of them, the Stephen King one. We watched. What was that called? Oh my god!
Outsider.
The Shapeshifter. Outsider. Yeah, thank you. Like, is a show like The Outsider, as much as like I know I loved it, I think you really enjoyed it too. Is that enough?
Not watched a single episode, but hey, thank you.
Oh,
for
okay,
the credit.
my bad. Have you not?
No.
Oh my god, watch The Outsider, you fool. This show's amazing. But is it enough to pay £16 a month for just a single service? That's on top of, like, if you want to also have Netflix and Disney Plus and all of these other ones as well. Like, is that, like, is shows like The Outsider enough to draw you into it? And I don't know if it is. So they've certainly put, their cards down on the table here to say, all right, well, not only are you getting like our typical high quality show, you're also going to get all of these blockbuster level titles. This is not just the sort of stuff that Netflix has typically been putting out, or any of the other streaming services have been kind of putting out, which are often, I feel like, many are like, or could be like, very successful in the cinema, but they are getting released straight onto here, and people's expectations of them lower slightly. It's like, oh, it's just a straight to streaming movie. So obviously we got the news last week that Wonder Woman was happening, and then this has followed, and it seems on the surface like it's crazy, but I really don't think that it is. When you take all of that stuff into context, like how much this service is going to be every month, the fact that it's only going to be 30 days on there and then it's going to be back, it's just regularly in cinemas, the fact that they don't have a international presence, then you also have to weigh up the fact of lost home box office revenue, like when it releases on iTunes or YouTube Movies or Google Movies or whatever. Like, that's still a significant amount of income for these studios. Like, they make a lot of money selling their stuff digitally. And all of a sudden, if you're not selling it digitally, well, then that's also money that you're not, getting every month. And then to only do it for 1 year, I have to then start and go, okay, well, what have they got to gain from this? Because it seems like they are potentially losing out on billions of dollars here. And it's all on the gamble that people will sign up for this year and then keep paying through next year and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And I just don't know if that gamble's going to pay off. And then I have to ask myself, well, and how does this change the notion of a blockbuster? Because, I don't know what Wonder Woman's budget was, but I'm sure it would not have received the same level of budget. Dune certainly would not have received the same level of budget if they always knew that I was going to just go straight to the streaming service. So let's say, for argument's sake, they stick with this this system that they've got where, okay, you know what, from now on, everything under the Warner banner is going to go to HBO Max at the same time as it arrives in cinemas. But we're no longer going above $100 million for a budget, because it's just not there anymore. The money, like when you consider lost box office sales and lost digital sales, it's just not there. So we're not doing it anymore. So when you dig way down into the story, it's not as alarming as it first seems at the start. I think it's a big shot, and I think the sort of movie chains and stuff should still be quite worried and should be trying to make deals and plan ahead for all of this sort of stuff, because the pressure is mounting, but I still think that it is not the kind of nail in the coffin as people have kind of made it out to be.
I'm not sure if you noticed that the reaction from the theater chains like AMC has not been as categorical like it was with Universal when, when Universal released Trolls and they said, we're not playing your movies anymore. And then they started negotiating and everything. Right now, apparently there are talks, between Warner and AMC, but there was no official statement that we're not going to play any movies or whatever. And we know that for releasing Wonder Woman 1984 at the same time on HBO and in theaters, the theaters are actually getting a better cut from the movie, like the movie made in the theaters, than they would normally make. So it's about 60% of the price, of the ticket than before. So this might not, like the article that we citing, that they say it might not be the case in the future. If I think it's a big experiment for everyone. Like Warner is making like a huge experiment. First of all, to make people subscribe to the HBO Max. That's the kind of flagship, premium sort of service, and they want to get people there, and I completely get it. But to do it on this basis, when we're gonna just do 2021, like the whole year, when obviously optimistically looking, probably by half of the year, June, July, we might be going back to kind of normal, and by the end of next year should be relatively normal. I think it's a kind of big statement for them. I would probably say, oh, maybe we're just gonna do next half a year,
that
like that, and
strange.
review it. But no, they just say categorically 1 year. So it's kind of interesting. And I said, 2021 is gonna be this, and then like you mentioned, 2022 we're not gonna have any more new content coming in. I think the genie is out of the bottle at that point, and they will already kind of know whether they made it or not made it. I think still it's gonna be so hard to get the same revenue from the, I don't know, subscription base for a movie like Dune or a movie like Wonder Woman that you would get from a theater. But obviously in this very moment the theater is not gonna be nowhere near, like as we know, people don't go to the theater in the same capacity, in the same volume that they would want to go as well. And we have, interestingly, next week Disney has they call, right? It's like a call is scheduled for them, and they're gonna announce, they're gonna be probably talking about their plans for the next year or so. So that's gonna be kind of interesting. What's the reaction for them?
Their Disney Investor Day, which last year or 2 years ago now was, to kind of give you an idea of the significance that Disney treated with, was when they fully announced Disney Plus and the Mandalorian and the pricing structure and stuff like that. That was at the Disney Investor Day. And then when you consider the fact that they didn't have a D23 this year, which is their usual sort of big summertime sort of conference that they have, and they also have scheduled this to be 4 hours long. They clearly have some news that they want to talk about. Now, that being said, I don't think Disney are going to go that route, the same route as Warner Brothers. I think that they are very much like, no, we believe in movie theaters, and that's where we think people are going. And Disney Plus is still growing. Like, they've still added several 15 million or something new people this year or something like that. So they're super happy with its growth rate. I think what we're going to see at it, kind of aside from the streaming news, is I think they'll announce some stuff like we talked about last episode, that they're going to bring straight to Disney Plus. But I think what we'll probably see more here is more announcements of Disney Plus officially, like Disney Plus TV series that we don't know about yet. I seen a rumor yesterday that Kenobi is starting to film in January in England, and they haven't officially announced a show like that yet. So I feel like we're going to get a lot of big Disney news around particularly Star Wars and the Marvel cinematic universe, and maybe how that's going to tie in with their Fox acquisition and stuff like that next Thursday, whatever date that is. I can't remember, but that is Thursday the 10th. But I feel like they will pretty much be like, no, we think that, we're really excited to tell you that Black Widow is coming to movie theaters on this date in March of 2021, and we can't wait for you to see it. And here's a new trailer. But I, other than a few movies that we didn't care about anyway, I think that we're not going to see a major jump back to what Warner have announced, to be honest with you. But I could be wrong.
Yeah, we'll find out, and we might just go back and record like a special episode about what the hell happens. Anything else you wanted to add on to this controversial kind of topic on Warner?
Well, I mean, I guess like it does suck that we don't have access to HBO Max here.
I think it sucks and it's good because this way we actually get those movies in the theater without any hesitations or any foul play or whatever. The Wonder Woman's coming 2 weeks earlier or a week earlier here than in the US, and I hope the new movies for 2021 are going to be kind of slowly coming in, as we are the first country in the world to have, or like in Europe or wherever, like have the vaccination actually going on, you know. Yeah, so we're gonna be fine, Conor. I think on Monday everyone's gonna be fine.
The good news is, though, for people that can watch this in the US, is that one of the big problems with HBO Max has been its terrible quality.
You mentioned that during the last episode that Wonder Woman 1984 in 1080p, that's gonna be horrible. And then Patty Jenkins listened to our episode and she went on Twitter and she said, Conor, don't worry, it's gonna be in 4K.
That's right, yeah. It's not only 4K though, but it's 4K and HDR or Dolby Vision, depending on what your setup supports. So, like, again, this is totally the same across most of the other services. Like Netflix supports this and Disney Plus supports this. Amazon Prime supports like Ultra HD and I think HDR as well. So it's not really acceptable that a major service that's $16 a month did not support this up until this point. But, Wonder Woman has been the kind of catalyst to say, okay, we need to make this happen. This can't go on like this. And I would imagine the same with like Dune. Like, how much work went into making that movie look the way that it looks, and to be like, oh, and you mean people are going to just watch this in 1080p? Like, it's heartbreaking for these directors and cinematographers and everything to pore over these details and then find out that their movies are just going to be shown for people watching it on 5-year-old TVs on like low resolution and poor bit rate and everything like that. It's got to be kind of heartbreaking. I'm sure Nolan is just super glad that he got Tenet out. It actually makes me wonder, was this news that they had been planning? And he was like, you put Tenet out now before this happens. I want people to see this in the cinema. So I do not want this coming for the first time to some 1080p streaming service in the US only. Like, get it out now. But hey ho.
Yeah, I'm talking about films released online and in good quality. I don't think none of us actually paid £20 to watch Mulan when it first came out. No, I didn't.
No.
Did you? No.
No.
Right now, it's available for free with your subscription if you subscribe to Disney Plus. So if you waited, you might just enjoy yourself and watch it.
Oh, did that go live?
Yeah.
When?
Just recently.
No. I literally went on and checked for it the other day and I couldn't. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, Conor,
I
enjoy it.
I literally checked for it what I felt like a day or 2 days ago and I didn't see it, but there you go. Because I remember saying I'm going to wait until this just comes to Disney Plus. They shouldn't have announced a date for this. That was not good business, but here we go.
No, I think that's why also people kind of waited and they'll be just watching it right now.
Oh, okay. We'll talk about that sometime in the future.
Sometime in the future. It might actually make our list of best of 2020, maybe, if we watch it on time. Actually, so I'm just going to make a quick kind of interruption here to our news. We're working on preparing the episodes until the end of the year and beyond. And we will make our list of best movies of 2020. But we want to make this list as fair as possible. Are we going to wait until Wonder Woman comes out to the cinemas? because
Yeah.
this is quite a big film to watch. And I also wanted to watch Soul, which will be coming December 25th, I think, to Disney Plus. And this might make our list, so maybe not at all, but I think it's fair for us to watch those films, and we'll come back with the best of 2020 at the beginning of 2021, if that makes sense. Okay, I don't know if this show is gonna make our list of best shows of 2020, but definitely I've been enjoying it. Connor's been enjoying it. We are talking about the Bake Off, and Bake Off has finished. We know the winner. We're not gonna say who that is. If you still watching it or catching up, or maybe just starting watching it, but I found a really good article about how this show was made, and also about some controversies and about toxic response of the fans, of people who've been watching it on social media towards the people that kind of made it through and moved on. So I'm gonna link that in our show notes. Our show notes are full of goodness, so just go and click there and you will see a lot of stuff there. But it's super interesting that how this kind of TV show was made during the pandemic, that everyone was quarantining, the people were cut off from their families, and then 7 weeks it actually took them to complete the TV series, complete the recording, and everyone was kind of staying in the same place, staying the same hotel. Interesting details. I think if you've enjoyed this show this year, you should essentially just check it out. Have you actually, Conor, managed to watch the final, or?
Yeah, I did. I think
exciting, or?
Yeah, no, it was cool. I didn't see the second to last episode, the one that had all of the controversy around it. I'm using controversy lightly here because really, who cares? But I do think it's kind of funny that I spoke about it here on the show as like a really happy, sort of positive show, and then like 2 weeks later, it's just marred and like horrible, like people being horrible to contestants for something that absolutely wasn't their fault, and all of this kind of like toxicity all of a sudden building around it. And I do feel like stuff like that has a tendency to happen, and it can really quickly get away from you. Like, I would not be surprised if we find that, like, next year when they do the show, that there's another thing that causes like outrage or whatever, and I find that this sort of spirals out of control sometimes. Like you can go back to like the Rian Johnson Star Wars stuff, and it's like, people treat so much Star Wars stuff with such hostility now, and it can't, and like the brand as a whole has almost been like somewhat tainted by it, because of what happened sort of throughout that period. And it wasn't, it's also there's some nonsense, but it like sticks to it, and it's really hard to get rid of. You almost need to, like, maybe the Bake Off works because you don't hear about it for another year, it goes away entirely, and that's it, and it just next like May or something, it's just like, hey, we're back, or June or whatever time, I don't know when it airs. But
another topic that maybe is a little bit connected to it, that we've learned that the formerly actress, we're gonna tiptoe around it, I don't want to be overstepping here. So the actress known as Ellen Page is now known as Elliot Page. So they have been a star of many movies, and including recently the series, The Umbrella Academy on Netflix. And Netflix has actually announced that they will change their his name, his credit in the past films that are available on the platform. And I think it's a big kind of a deal in terms of the industry, like having this sort of spotlight on them, that we have someone who is gender non-binary person or transgender person. I don't really know, kind of like, am I using the correct names over here? But this is definitely the big announcement, and I think we should be at least talking about it for the sake of anyone who's out there who's maybe not sure, who's afraid. that the reaction of the people of the community, the close to them, because Elliot is in the center of attention. He's a big star, right? And making this decision, coming out to people, it definitely wasn't easy. And
of course not, no.
I think it had. I didn't follow that much, but there is definitely some sort of snarky comments and people who maybe don't understand what people like Elliot go through. But a lot of people that they work with have been very, very supportive in that process, and that's lovely to see, actually.
Yeah, I think that's really cool from Netflix. And this is the second time then in like I guess a week or two where they've kind of came out and done something in support of one of the kind of artists that they work with. Did you happen to see any of the Dave Chappelle stuff?
No.
I'll do a very, very quick recap of it, but have you ever watched any of his stand-ups? I remember.
Yeah, I did. Well, I did watch the one that he's done recently, actually, in self-isolation, when everyone was kind of like in the bubble, and that was pretty good. Yeah.
So he in the early mid-2000s, he had his show on Comedy Central called The Chappelle Show. The show that he ended up walking away from, but kind of before season 3 officially released. I think it was season 3 anyway. And he kind of left Hollywood entirely after that, and he moved to Africa and stuff like that, just because he was like, I can't be around any of this anymore. And it was a lot of like contractual stuff that made him leave, where he just felt like he wasn't being kind of fairly treated, and then they kind of tried to spin it to make him look like he was the bad guy, saying that he was like, always high and taking drugs and things like that there. The Chappelle Show, he signed away to Comedy Central when he was 27. When he signed that contract, Comedy Central owned the rights. And about 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, Netflix put the Chappelle Show on Netflix, and HBO Max also put it on HBO Max to tie in our earlier story. When Chappelle had no say in the matter whatsoever, this was Comedy Central sold the rights for them to air it on their platforms. So when Chappelle found out that it was airing, he was furious. And there's a small part that kind of circulated around on Instagram of him telling the story about it. And I'll not say too much about it, because I recommend going watching it. It's about 15-20 minutes long, but basically he says that it really, really made him mad. So he phoned Netflix. He called up the people at Netflix, because he was like, when this all happened with the Chappelle Show, Netflix didn't exist, so there's maybe context that they're missing. So he phoned them up and was like, look, I am upset by the fact that you put the Chappelle Show on there, and I don't think it's right, and I would like you to take it down. Which seems wild, because I assume that they've paid a whole bunch of money to Comedy Central to get the rights to air this. And Chappelle Show is amazing if you've never seen it. It's so good, and it's like, it's so cultural as well, and it was a huge show in the US at the time, and it made Chappelle like a massive star. And Netflix said, okay, we agree, that's fine, and they just took it down. And Chappelle says in his like sort of stand-up piece, he was like, that's why I fuck with Netflix, because he was like, they paid me my money and they stay true to their word. So they've so I recommend going and watching it. He tells some amazing stories that lead to him talking about the story of the Chappelle Show. It's amazing. He's just such a masterful storyteller. So I think it's another sign that, like, Netflix are trying to do the right thing at every occasion where they have to sort of step up to the plate. That they're trying to say, okay, do you know what? Like, if we want to have people make good shows for us, we have to respect their work. And that is something that's very often missing across a lot of the other Hollywood studios. So I guess even what we're about to review in a little bit, we'll probably kind of talk about that to some extent as well. But yeah, go watch it. It's called Unforgiven. You can probably find it on YouTube and stuff now. It's like a 20-minute Chappelle part. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yep, I'll link it in our show notes as well. And final two pieces of news we've got a little bit sad. We've heard that David Prowse, this is a British actor who was best known for playing Darth Vader in the original Star Wars trilogy, has died at the age of 85. And that's sad story, sad news. Definitely is an iconic man who has been who played the few minor roles. He was a bodyguard in Stanley Kubrick Clockwork Orange, and then that's where kind of George Lucas has spotted him, and he auditioned for the roles both Darth Vader and Chewbacca, and eventually he got the role of Darth Vader. His voice was never used in the movie, as we know. That was James Earl Jones talking, but David Prowse was actually doing the physical stuff, the kind of towering figure, and the choking of stormtroopers and his generals and marching with the lightsaber. That's his obvious contribution. He was loved by his fans. He was like a definitely big icon. He also was a bodybuilder. I'm not sure if you know. He actually worked with Christopher Reeve when he was kind of bulking up to play the role of Superman. And as well, and one of the things that I've learned that he was someone called Green Cross Codeman. So in the 70s, he was actually teaching kids how to cross the road. And maybe not you, but probably some of you, maybe your parents actually know more, Conor, who the Green...
Never heard of him.
Never heard of him. Green Cross Codeman. Maybe ask around. So that's David Prowse. The second news is that Hugh Keays-Byrne, so the person who played another villain in the film universe, who played in George Miller's Mad Max Fury Road, and actually in the first Mad Max, has passed away at the age of 73. So both men, both Hugh and both David, actually described by everyone as the loveliest, nicest people to work with. And Hugh Keays-Byrne, he played Immortan Joe. Is one of those people who, as much as you can say about Darth Vader, he had his redemption arc. Immortan Joe, nah. They've never had it, never deserved it. But such an interesting kind of statement, and this is from the interview from on IndieWire that George Miller actually was talking about the story, how he met him, how he get involved with him, got him to play in the first Mad Max, and took them another 20-30 years actually to work together on the movie that is actually part of the same kind of universe together. Moving forward, this was the news, and now let's just quickly discuss what we've been watching. Your list is much shorter than mine. I'll just give you a heads up. Go ahead.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, it's just so funny when you look at like the difference between the two of them. All right. So first of all, I watched The Hunt, which is a 2020 movie, and I think was initially one of the kind of early movies this year that made its way to digital really, really, really soon, or pretty much at the same time as it was in cinemas, because that was when cinemas around the world started to close their doors, and there was no way that they were going to recoup any money from this. Like, it wasn't like they were going to be like, oh, in a year we're going to bring it back to the cinema. I think you could probably still catch it in some cinemas if they're open, that are still kind of playing movies throughout the year, because there's not as many new movies that are coming to them. Yep. So I'm sure there's somewhere that you can watch this in a cinema. Would I recommend it? Not really, to be honest. It's on Amazon Prime, I think, now. That's where I watched it. And it's it's a totally fine, not that great movie, to be honest with you. It's what's it a lot like? I feel like it's trying to be a lot like Cabin in the Woods. That's the kind of what, like, oh, it's like kind of tongue in cheek, and it's all a bit silly, and it's all a bit like extra gory, but I felt like it lacked any of the charm that Cabin in the Woods had. And I think what kept continuously making me roll my eyes was that, like, it was trying to talk about like left versus right politics, like, crazy
it's very political,
liberals.
and a lot of people were discussing this movie as well, like it's gonna be like antagonizing those two groups, especially in the US, like the Democrats and Republicans, even more. I don't think so.
Yeah, it didn't. It just really felt immature, to be honest with you. It didn't feel like it had anything interesting to say on the entire matter. I mean, I did like the sort of final sort of act, I guess, in it with the two female characters sort of like fighting it out, as without giving away too much. I thought that was like, it was good fun watching it. It was a good like sort of finale to the rest of the movie. But other than that, I was like, this is kind of stupid, and I'm kind of bored. It's not great if I'm bored watching a movie where people are trying to kill each other, right?
Yeah, I understand.
I did just put something else then into our document that I remembered that I watched. So
what is that?
Okay, the reason I put it in is because both of us typically like to talk a lot about things that are like culturally significant to us from where we're from. So you obviously like always are like really kind of a big promoter of stuff that's coming from Poland. Whether it be things that have like inspired your childhood or something like that. Like that horrific Halloween movie that you shared with me. And I remembered then that I watched for the first time in a long time this year. I chose to watch a Irish cultural phenomenon known as the Late Toy Show.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So every year, or every like weekend, there's always a TV show on RTE, which is an Irish broadcast station called The Late Late Show, and it's the typical thing that you expect from like celebrities on to kind of talk about the new stuff that they're in or the new book that they're selling and blah 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 blah. But every year they always have a special like long episode, kind of at the start of December, called The Late Late Toy Show. And the Late Late Toy Show was always like a place for first of all, it was like you always had the main host who hosted every week, but all of the guests this time were primarily just children, like this Irish children, and they would have the children demo toys. And as a kid, I used to always watch it with my granny. Always, like at that time of the year, I'd go and stay in her house, and we'd always watch it. And you would be like making the list in your head of all of the things that you wanted to get from Santa, right? You're like, oh my god, like there's a new, like they have Star Wars lightsabers. Oh my god, like so much stuff. Like, oh, it's a Nintendo 64. Oh my god, that's what I wanted. And like, so we decided to put it on this year because I just was like, I haven't seen it in so long, and I kind of want to check it out. Because they weren't going to do it this year, obviously with COVID, and they decided, you know what, actually, if ever there was a time when this show was needed, this was the year that we need to do it. And they did it, and it was all socially distanced, and they had a lot of their kids on and stuff like that. But what I thought was so special about this time was that they put a lot of emphasis on this. They usually would have shared like toys that maybe were like out of the price range of a lot of parents to get kids, right? This year they focused an awful lot on books, for example.
Okay, that's cool.
Because like obviously it's like it's affordable to get someone a book, like
not PlayStation 5,
yeah, like that's the thing. The PlayStation 5 was nowhere to be seen, right? Like there was no Xbox, no PlayStation, no Switch, no nothing like that. It was like, oh, like here's books or like a Lego set or something like that. So it was like
or a chessboard. to play chess?
No chessboard. I don't
Ah.
recall a chessboard, I'm afraid. A lot of this time they did like a fundraiser for it as well, and they ended up raising like 8 million euros to go to like children's charities. It's absolutely phenomenal amounts. But there was some kids that they had on throughout who had illnesses and things like that, and it was just incredible to watch. Like, I was watching with Enya, and I was like misty-eyed. I'll go as far as saying misty-eyed. Enya, she was just bawling. She was like literally like, I can't watch anymore. I have to leave. I can't watch anymore, or please let me know when this person is no longer on. Because what I thought was so incredible about it was like the kids, they showed no fear or sadness for the situation that they were in. The show still somehow managed to maintain, even though they had like, you know, sick kids on or whatever, or kids who have had a particularly tough year through illness, and yet they were just so ecstatic about the fact that they were on the Late Late Toy Show that there still was no like, oh my god, what a downer, this is like really bringing me down. The show just managed to just completely like explode in joy and positivity. And I think like I'm so glad that I don't know why, there was just some part of me is like, I'm gonna watch the Late Late Toy Show this year. And because I haven't done it in a long time, and I think I was looking for that, like, oh, there's gotta be like, I want to watch something that's just like nice, like just again just happy and positive, and boy did it deliver. So if you want to watch something that will like absolutely like traumatize you in a good positive way, through happy stories but also some sad stories, I would recommend checking out the Late Late Toy Show. It's quite long, it's like 2 hours or something like that, I can't remember exactly, but it's a good insight into Irish culture as well. So that's what I've watched this week. Let's get to this behemoth list that you have.
And where can you find the Late Late Toy Show?
You'll be able to stream it on the RTE website. I assume it, like I was able to watch it here with no difficulty, so I assume you'll be able to watch it as well. On there as well. So it's RTE's website. Just Google RTE, you'll find it. Late Toy Show. It's on there. They have it broken down into segments as well. I think when I was looking at it on the app on my TV, you could watch just like highlighted segments of different parts of it. But obviously, we wanted to watch the whole thing.
Yeah, binge it. So yes, my list is quite big. It's been like 2 weeks since we talked, so I think it's just the matter of actually kind of many things have built up there. There was one thing I watched, and I was thinking about you and your big TV setup, and you liking the kind of films with great visual effects and everything. And this is actually surprising. It's a film called Salute 7. So it's a Russian film set in space. It's based on the story of this space station in the 80s that's was hit by the comet, like the debris. It almost sounds like Gravity, right? And it is shot very kind of like the no money was spared to actually shoot that film because it just looks stunning. And this is available on Amazon Prime. It's kind of a combination of Gravity, combination of Apollo 13, essentially like 2 astronauts or cosmonauts, because they're Russian. They go to the space station and try to save it from falling down. It's a little bit kitsch, like kind of, and cheesy in moments, but the effects are just incredible. It's a good story as well. So I recommend that. And I also watched the Disney Plus TV series The Right Stuff, and there's 8 episodes of that. And this is essentially another story of astronauts, and this time it's the American astronauts, the Mercury 7. So 7 astronauts that one of them was meant to be the first man that is gonna go to space. So we obviously know from the history that was Yuri Gagarin from Russia that actually made it to space before any of them. It's not the best TV show I've seen, but I got through it. It had some interesting kind of stories of those people who were chosen, how they were chosen, why they were chosen, and kind of the impact as well. Like they were big stars back in the 60s when this whole thing happened, and they got so much money from the press, and everyone was they were just followed like Lady Di these days. Like everyone wanted to know what they do, what they eat, how they behave, and everything. So that's interesting. You can find this whole show right now on Disney Plus. I don't know. I was probably in the mood for something catastrophic, so I watched Kursk, and this is on Amazon Prime as well. So this is the story of the submarine that in 2000 and got there was an incident, and everyone who was on board of that submarine, and despite the efforts, has died. And quite an interesting film. I don't know how much kind of true it is to what actually happened, but the most important part of it that happens inside the boat, and then there's it's just incredible, and it's so moving. So this is a movie by Thomas Winterberg. It's not his best movie, but definitely something to watch. Matthias Skonhorst, Lea Seydoux, and we have Colin Firth and Max von Sydow as well in this film. So pretty good stuff as well. What else? A new movie on Netflix called Hillbilly Elegy. I'm not sure if you wanted to watch it or if you want to.
Who's in this?
So we have Amy Adams, Glenn Close in this movie.
That's right.
Yeah. Directed by Ron Howard. And, when you watch this film, it feels like someone's essentially trying to do their kind of pull for Oscars. You have heavy makeup, addiction, drama, and stuff. Oh, it's just not a good film.
Ooh, really?
It's just not a good film. And
I was about to say, like, you know what? Put that on a shelf, and we'll talk about it in like a week or two. Whenever I'll watch it. No, I'm not gonna bother.
I think you just give it a shot.
Okay.
I couldn't get through the aura of it, what it's trying to be and what it really is. You can see that you have Glenn Close and Amy Adams pretending to be, they acting. It's just very annoying. On the other spectrum of things, on Netflix, you can find a movie that was released in the theaters very briefly in the UK. Now was also available to buy. Now you can watch it with your subscription. It's Yes, God, Yes. And it's one of the funniest films of this year, directed by Karen Main. And it's got Natalia Dyer of the Stranger Things in the main role. It's a story of a Catholic teenager, that she's discovering her body and what kind of pleasuring herself might be. I think this movie has more sexual innuendos than you can imagine. It made me laugh so hard as well. And it's actually really, really good. And I don't want to be talking more about it. I hope you can watch it and maybe we can discuss it together. But it's definitely a thumbs up from me. And I would say not only thumbs going up while watching this film. Obviously. Gracious. Yeah, I know, joking. I caught up with the Small Axe miniseries, anthology series on BBC, and I've watched Red, White, and Blue, and this is the third installment of that series with John Boyega. Yeah, so this is the story of Leroy Logan, who is a young man who chose the path of university and studying, and chose the path of science, and then he decides to join the force. And I love the line in there, I'm going to join the force, and someone asks him, what, you going to become a Jedi? And this is obviously a question down to John Boyega, who was in Star Wars, right? But this movie is spectacular, it's tense, it's great, and it's also not extremely long. It's hour 20 minutes, so it's a movie, it's a TV series, who knows? Nice. But it's just fantastic. It's another Steve McQueen home run on that thing. And I think I'm just gonna quickly say that I came back to Mubi to watch a concert, the recording of a concert of Niels Fram. He's one of the most incredible composers, and he's playing this. He's set. He's essentially himself, piano, few synthesizers, and he's creating those soundscapes that are just incredible to kind of listen. And there's not much to watch, but he's playing in one of the most beautiful venues in the world, definitely in Germany, in Berlin, in Funkhaus. So spectacular stuff, great music. And that's Tripping with Niels Framen is available on Mubi. And actually, I went back to the cinema, Connor.
Yay!
And it was like
Still
an
closed
adventure.
here, so
Yeah,
tell
it
me
was
all
like an
about it.
adventure. It was like an adventure. I forgot, first of all, that the sound in the cinema is so loud. You know, when you watch something at home, you can always just put the volume down. You can't do this in the cinema. And I was like, oh, this is a bit loud. And what I would do at home, I would just probably, I don't have to think that my sound is annoying my neighbors or anything like this, or someone's asleep in the home.
Yeah, I don't care
No,
about
I
that
can
anyway,
just
so.
blast it. And the movie I watched, there was a second viewing of that film. I wanted my girlfriend to watch it as well. It's The Possessor, the film by Brandon Cronenberg, one of the films I watched during the London Film Festival. I watched it at home, and so I thought to myself, I really want to watch this movie in the theater, and it's still as good as it was at the first time. One of my highlights of the festival. It's very gory, kind of futuristic, thrillery, horror-y, buddy. I loved it. I think this is one of those kind of films that I love watching, that type of dark fantasy, if you can call it dark sci-fi. So if you can catch it, actually right now you can just rent it or buy it on any of your VOD platforms. I watched it in the cinema because there was a Q&A as well. But I forgot they do Q&As on Zoom these days. And the quality of the movie obviously was spectacular. But then at the end, you have this Zoom recorded, watched on the big screen. I thought to myself, this is not what I expected to see or hear. The quality of the sound wasn't great either. So that was Possessor, and is available right now to buy or rent. Okay, this is me. I just blasted through all that stuff for us to move on to reviews.
An exhaustive list of stuff. Some of it I will go back and watch, and we can chat about maybe a little bit more at another stage. I do want to see Yes God Yes. I remember considering renting it a few months back when it first went to digital, and it's on Netflix now, which is awesome. And I will watch Red, White, and Blue as well at some point, hopefully in the next week or two.
Perfect. Time for the main stuff that we've been watching.
Mm-hmm.
So, for about 2 months right now, there've been trailers and teasers of the new David Fincher movie. So, David Fincher, I think one of the authors of current era of cinema, of movies, the director behind Seven, Fight Club, Zodiac, Gone Baby Girl.
Girl with a Dragon Tattoo.
Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, yeah. Not as good as the original Girl with a Dragon Tattoo. No. And The Social Network, and many, many great films that we love. So his new movie is called Mank. This is the story of Herman J. Mankiewicz, who is a screenwriter in the 30s Hollywood, and he's writing the movie that's changed the cinema, Citizen Kane. And I thought to myself, what better kind of way of maybe going back to this classic film than actually discussing Mank and a little bit of Citizen Kane. And you've never watched Citizen Kane before.
No, this was my first time actually.
Yeah, so I asked Conor to go on BBC iPlayer in dreadful 1080p quality.
Yeah, it wasn't even, and it was probably less. But...
And watch, yeah, exactly, and watch a movie that's 3x4 in a kind of frame rate, and it's black and white, and it's not been restored to 4K. And Conor actually watched it. So this is obviously the Orson Welles first movie. So a little bit of a kind of background story. Orson Welles made his kind of like big debut in radio. So he directed, produced the War of the Worlds on the radio that was broadcasted, and kind of changed the life of many people. Definitely made him a star because it was a kind of a play that looked or sounded like the news. Like there was a reporter reporting, like people we are being under the attack of the aliens, and that was kind of groundbreaking because people really thought that something like this is happening. Probably not everyone, but there were reports of people in panic. And after this big stunt, the Orson Welles got money from RKO, which was the one of the biggest players in Hollywood, to make a movie. And back in the days, he got essentially a free hand to do whatever he wanted. No interaction, no interaction from the studio. They would not do anything with the script, the story he wanted to tell. He can do whatever he wanted, and he essentially did whatever he wanted. So he directed, produced, and co-written a movie called Citizen Kane, which was quite a big deal back in the days, because that movie was thought to be kind of based on the story of one of the richest, most influential people in the US in the 30s, of William Hearst. So William Hearst owned quite a lot of media back in the days. So he was a bit of like Rupert Murdoch of these days, right? So someone who has quite a lot of power, not direct power, but he was super influential. He was hanging with a lot of, the most important people in politics and in cinema. And so he had a lot of money. So that movie, when it was written and it was produced, he tried to stop it. So you would hear a lot of stories of then newspapers not writing about it. The movie, when it was actually released, it was not kind of a big success, to say the least. And and also what happened, it was nominated for an Oscar. It got one. And that movie today is treated as the milestone in the movie making. So and it's incredible to say, because Orson Welles, obviously he's such a big persona, he's such a egocentric, and he's almost a Kane of the movie. He didn't know how to make movies. And I read an article that they actually sat down with Greg Toland, who is a cinematographer of that film, and he worked with John Ford on some westerns. And he sat down while watching one of these previous films, and he watched one movie over and over again, asking him, how did you do this? How do you make this to happen on the screen? How this is done? And this was his actual school to how to make movies. And Conor, it's probably really hard to kind of review this movie, because so many books were written on it, and so many people have, who have probably much more knowledge than us, said so many things about it. But I want to know, what's your opinion watching it, today, almost 80 years after it was officially released, first time released. What's your thoughts on Citizen Kane?
Yeah, you're right. Like, I was thinking the same thing. Like, what is there left to say about Citizen Kane, right? Like, surely every element of this movie has been picked over with a fine-tooth comb and had a full article or book or documentary.
There's probably
or
shelves of books on this film,
So, like, there isn't really much I feel like there's really much more I could say, like, other than, like, just what I thought about watching it. And so much of when you have to watch something this old is that you have to take into context, a lot of it, because it's, you know, it's, you're watching it and it's like stuff that you've seen 1,000 times now because they've either copied it or they've referenced it or something like that. And the sort of like, you know, culture of Citizen Kane had not necessarily eluded me. Like, I knew bits and pieces of like its importance and how big it was to cinema and stuff like that, but just never actually sat down to watch it. And sitting down to watch it now, like, you know, you can get aside that sure it doesn't have like any 4K or anything like that, and that's fine. You don't really mind when you are watching something like this. It's not like, sometimes you're like, you know what, it's actually better that nobody tried to touch this, because it can sometimes completely ruin something. So it's totally fine that you're watching it in kind of the way that it was initially all sort of shot and put together, and put out. But there's so many, what stood out to me was like so much of the storytelling and so much of the cinematography in particular was just so unique. And so like the way that they told some of the story was like, because overall I don't think I necessarily cared what was happening in it, to be honest with you. I was like, I don't find myself caring about any of the people in this movie, you know, and part of that is down to just the fact that it was written when it was written. And screenwriting and stuff has obviously evolved and so on and so forth, but in the way that they delivered the story, it still was so much of it was like, oh, like that was a really cool transition, or it was a really cool way that they approached like telling that, you know, with like the two of them sitting at the dining table and stuff like that, or how abstract some of it felt, and then how full of life other parts of it felt as well. Like when it starts off and it's kind of that like recap, it feels so odd and abstract. Like, you know, you see like the Zandu and it's like, what is going on here? This feels so weird. And then, you know, you move on to actually talking about Kane and seeing him interact with the people, and it feels all of a sudden then so much more full of life. To me, I think, what just stood out the most about this movie was that, you know, without going and reading any more into it, which I haven't done. Like, I feel like I could go and read a bunch of this stuff and I would feel maybe more appreciation for some of it, but I wanted to kind of watch it just blind and see what stood out to me the most, or what I felt like came away like, okay, I understand that it's a movie, it's 80 years old, and blah, 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 and it's so important. What is the part to me that stood out the most? And it was the way in which the story was delivered through moving picture.
Yeah.
That I was like, oh, like this is really, really cool. Like some of this, like if I tried to sit down now, like I have this, you know, like 1,300-pound phone with an incredible camera in my pocket, and it's like, I don't know if I could pull off what they're able to do here with way more basic technology and stuff around them, right? So, you know, it's one of those kind of like, it is somewhat of a master in storytelling. You know, how it maintains the title of like best movie of all time, I don't know. There obviously, like, there's strong arguments for it because it seems to recurringly come up as the best movie of all time. But I just question, have these people seen The Dark Knight? You know, you know, like have these people watched The Dark Knight? Because I don't know if they have. Because, you know, there's
Conor, okay, I know you're joking. I hope you're joking. I've you know, Citizen Kane, as I studied, I was my studies were actually involved in like watching this film as part of the curriculum. You know, like, oh, you have to actually watch the Citizen Kane, and we would sit down and would the kind of you know, go bit by bit. They're like, oh, what's this, what's that. I watching it again, I was like, this movie is just incredible. How so many things that we see today in the cinema we take for granted, actually in this film, it's pretty much everything is there. You know, the kind of the flashback, the montage that kind of pretends the chronicle that tells you the whole story, the whole film at the very beginning. You know pretty much everything that happens in there. And obviously it's confusing at the beginning, but then you kind of start understanding and seeing, like, from a perspective, oh, this is why this was there, and so on. there is a footage in there that maybe 40 years later in Zelig or in Forrest Gump that happened, and when you have a real person like Adolf Hitler in there standing next to Charles Kane. I'm not sure if you remember. They kind of made this as a trickery, right? They pretended, they made the footage look kind of tired. So all the reels, like they pretend they are from the 10s or 20s, they were actually dragged across the concrete to make scratches on them. So they look authentic and they look real.
Yeah.
So that's like cool. Incredible commitment to it. So and then, like, I mean, the story of the person that's like a media mogul, that the person that's influential, that kind of sort of wants to play to the people and then changes people's views. It's like I said, this is Murdoch. It's today's kind of media moguls. Even Trump. This is
100%. There's definitely like huge parallels that you can draw.
It is still in there, but I agree with you. This movie works for me the most from the visual perspective. This is pure visual storytelling. Mm-hmm. You might not have anyone explaining you what's happening. You will know pretty much everything from the beginning. The opening Gothic shots of the Xanadu Tower. You see the empty places. Everything is kind of wrong with this. Like it's, and this man on his bed, dying alone, right? He's like, okay, he's not been like, he's not surrounded by the family, he's the close one, he's kind of isolated, right? Then you have so many great shots. You mentioned the one with the kind of montage over time with his wife when they kind of grew apart, so they stood next to each other at the table. Then there's a next shot, they kind of like, and they finally at the end of the tables they don't talk to each other. So there is no explanation. They fall apart. No, you see this falling apart in front of your eyes. Yeah, there are so many great shots in there, and I'm not sure if you probably noticed also the cameras being put deliberately on like the low level as well to kind of show the great figure, the towering figure, the to show much more, and also the depth of the field. So you have someone at the very front, and then someone in the little bit in the middle, and then someone in the background. It says so much. There is this significant shot when they kind of show Charles Kane as the small boy playing in the snow, and the camera goes inside the house and it reveals one person, then goes a little bit inside more and it reveals another person, and then you see Charles in the background, like in the box, essentially closed somewhere. This movie, I mean, I'm gonna link a couple of articles I found. One is on BBC, the one is on the BFI, that kind of explain the storytelling greatness of Citizen Kane. And as much as we can say the movie is a little bit old-fashioned when we look at it today, maybe there's some comedic stuff doesn't work. So Bernard Herrmann came to later write music for Alfred Hitchcock. Greg Toland, fantastic cinematographer, and Orson Welles. He never repeated his success. His movies were interesting, but were never that big and bold. And obviously right now we can tie into Mank, or Mr. Herman Mankiewicz, who reportedly, according to his family, he actually wrote the script himself, and the Orson Welles didn't do anything. So this was also a very long discussion, so many articles and books written about it. And probably about 20 years ago or 30 years ago, turned out that what happened really, that Orson Welles had a credit, deserved credit in the script, because he actually put few key scenes in the film, added to the script. He added some dialogue, some very important stuff that was said by the main character. And Mank, directed by David Fincher, it's actually longer than Citizen Kane, but it's super interesting what Fincher in this movie is trying to do visually. I hadn't the movie is black and white. It is shot, it's not pretending that it's shot on like the old stock film, because it is crisp, sharp. It looks beautiful.
This movie looks fucking incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. It's in Dolby Vision on Netflix if you have the high-end Netflix and if your whole setup supports it. For anyone who doesn't know, Dolby Vision's like a high dynamic range, a form of high dynamic range, but it does it on a sort of frame by frame basis almost. Like it's analyzing every single frame essentially and dealing with that dynamic range, which means that your difference between your highlights and your shadows are really, there's a huge difference between the two of them for starters, and that the highlights maintain like, you know, bright and vivid details, and likewise the shadows maintain details. So Dolby Vision, like, perfect in a way for something to be shot in black and white. I don't know, does your TV support Dolby Vision though?
Not yet.
So, like, some of the sequences in this, even just as early as when he's being brought into the house, and they open the front door, you know, like where with the bed just in front of it, you know, like kind of where I'm talking about, and like Rita is coming in and stuff like that. Like they have as the front door opens, like you get like the reflection of the sun outside, like reflecting across the room and on the across characters, and you're getting like light leak and stuff happening from it, and it just looks unbelievable. And I was like, how did they do this? Like, how did they manage to do it? And I looked into it. So they had a new red 8K camera. For, you know, like the red cameras are very popular in Hollywood, and the camera that is usually used is it is a red 8K red Monstro 8K, but the one that they used this time was a red Monstro Chrome 8K, where it's the same thing, so it has the same huge 8K sensor, but it lets they don't put on the color filter on the front of it, so it doesn't actually capture color at all. The whole thing is shot natively in black and white. Because of this then, and because of this massive sensor, it also performs incredibly well in really, really low light situations, which you see in several parts of the movie. So, for example, when they are outside later on, when he goes outside and sits with...
Amanda Seyfried.
Yes, thank you, Amanda Seyfried, yes. He goes outside and sits with her and walks around the grounds. You can tell that was genuinely filmed at night, because there's a lot of green on there, but that is something that most other cameras would have just utterly failed at capturing, but yet somehow the sensor just lets in so much light, and it's just enough. And they have obviously set it up, and the cinematography by Eric Messerschmidt.
What a name.
I know, right? Like they obviously have their lighting set up in such a way that like you're getting just like the right kind of highlights and just the sort of right amount of like light dancing across their face, and but yet you can tell that like this is it. The scene is dark. Like I can tell that they're in a dark room, or I can tell that they're outside at night, and I can tell that it isn't just like they've set up a big sound stage and they're trying to light it properly and appropriately and blah blah blah. Like no, like they've fully committed to like, well, we can shoot essentially in the dark or as close to the dark as possible, and then we can set up our lighting to address that. And it just looks like, I reckon there's not a frame in this movie you couldn't pause at where it wouldn't look absolutely outstanding.
Absolutely,
if you have the right thing. So yeah, like for me, by far, like my favorite part of this movie was just watching it and how it looked by a long shot.
Yeah, absolutely. So this movie looks incredible, but obviously it's not using the technique of like, oh, let's kind of make it that it doesn't close you in like a very small space or something. It's just very widescreen, very breezy. But I'm not sure if you've noticed kind of two things that stood out for me. It still pretends that there is a reel of the film that needs to be changed. So every kind of, when the reel ends, there is the big there is the circle in the top
Yeah,
right corner, which we
yeah.
know from Fight Club when
Yeah.
Tyler Durden explains how this works.
Yeah.
And there is actually at least one place when the kind of this wobbles, the transition between one role and then another is not very fluid. It's kind of like jittery, and I'm like, okay, this is simulation. This is trying to
Yeah.
pretend something. And the main kind of part that is the simulation is the sound. The sound
Yeah.
sounds like you are sitting in a theater that is like a large theater, and the speakers, the mono speakers, they're kind of blasting the sound, and you can hear the echo kind of on the sides, and it's like the sound isn't like crisp in
No, it's not.
the way that today films are, but you still can understand everything that is said, but it kind of mimics the way that the sound experience in a theater would be. And there's also the music. I have to also put my hands down and say the music is just incredible. Our good friends Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross have made this the soundtrack for that movie. And after Watchmen, after Gone Girl, after the Social Network, this is another spectacular soundtrack.
Yeah, the soundtrack absolutely just adored it, because I just love that time period as well. Like, we joked at the start about like drinking and smoking, like, you know, they're all drinking and smoking in this, and it looks brilliant. And like the style and the fashion and the music, obviously it's not actually that great of a time, as a lot of us focused on the Great Depression, but it doesn't stop it from being cool as hell.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think who this movie will appeal to people who would want to maybe kind of learn a little bit more about the time or love that time of the 30s Hollywood land. That's how you see that, like, there's one shot when you can actually see Hollywood land in the background, how the movies are made, who is pulling the strings, and you can see Mank's kind of being this court jester, being this guy who always say what he thinks, and that's why other people like William Hurst like it. So this is kind of based on a true story. We don't know, like, obviously how much is it true story, and there are few great sequences in it. You described the kind of walk outside when they walk in the night. I really enjoyed that sequence. There are few references to Citizen Kane when he drops a bottle and the bottle kind of drops a rose, and you see, okay, this is the snow globe thing.
The monkeys
there is
at night.
Sorry?
The monkeys in the cages at night, when they're out walking and they see the different animals.
Yeah.
Like the opening to Citizen Kane, there's the monkeys in the cage at Xanadu.
Yeah, and there is this fantastic kind of the final kind of confrontation when Mank comes drunk to the party, and he starts describing this kind of Don Quixote scenario, and then he throws up. Everyone's disgusted, and he says, "Oh, don't worry, there's a white wine with a fish. It's coming. Everything is fine."
I was having a look there, and there's a website called the White Wine Came Up With the Fish.com, and what it is a series of behind the scene photographs that play the soundtrack at the same time. So you can just go through and see all of these like black and white photographs with the soundtrack playing. There's several hundred photographs in there. So yeah, the White Wine Came Up With the Fish.com.
Yeah, so the movie actually is like, there's two timelines there. One is the one kind of a writing of Citizen Kane. The other one are flashbacks to the 30s and how Mank got involved with Hearst and his kind of friendship. We never actually see that much of Orson Wells, when I'm kind of surprised. We never see him kind of meeting with Mank for the first time, maybe discussing what will happen and how to make a movie and kind of work on that. And that would be super interesting for me, but this movie is not about that, and there are so many great things in this film. You have great actors. I think my kind of minor problem with this, Gary Oldman as a great actor, he's not 43, which was the age of
Yeah.
Mank, when he was writing this. But obviously, back in the days, you had very old actors with younger actresses kind of playing together. So his wife is played by Tuppence Middleton, and she's half of his age.
Yeah.
And that was not that difference, I think, between his real life. You have amazing Lily Collins. I've seen her
She's
in
amazing.
She is so good in that. Amanda Seyfried is great in there.
Yeah.
But I think who is the best in this film is Charles Dance as William Hurst. He's got incredible presence, and he doesn't talk that much, but whenever he speaks, like hear the authority of that film. And it sounds like this would be a win, like a home run. But for me, there's some of those great moments in this film doesn't come up to a great film overall. This film is there's a lot of stuff that's happening. There's a lot of talking in there. It's kind of overwhelming at some points and boring at some points. I'm gonna now make a confession here. I tried to watch this film 3 times. I've fallen asleep twice while watching this film. Okay, it was evening, and I was maybe tired after the whole day, but that didn't keep me entertained to watch it. And I had a real problem with kind of watching this movie to the end. So I think overall, and one last thing is the story of Orson Welles' engagement is not true in that. So I don't know what the film is trying to say, that the Mankiewicz actually wrote this and Welles took the credit, because the real story is that Welles actually got involved in that script, and that was proven. That is not something that just came up last week. That's been a knowledge for last few good years. So that doesn't do justice to Orson Welles and the whole real story. And overall, the sum of that film, like altogether, doesn't work for me. I don't think it's as a technical achievement, it's a fantastic film. As a film, it's not that great. And yeah, I don't know what's your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think I don't know if I can't really feel where I land on it, because I was mesmerized by how it looked and how it sounded so much, and the performances are amazing. I think for me, what kind of acted as a little bit of a barrier is that I wasn't super familiar with the kind of controversy that surrounded Citizen Kane, obviously, given the fact that I hadn't actually seen the movie. So the sort of the story of the controversy that surrounded who wrote the script was like kind of news to me in a way, because I looked up a little bit of it afterwards, and the script for Mank was very much based on a story written in the New Yorker in 1971. There's a story published in the New Yorker, and it was all about like how he had nothing to do with it. And like Rita was able to kind of test. I think it was Rita that actually said like nothing that made it into the final movie was actually had he any part to play in when it came to the script itself. And then this was obviously very controversial and has been disputed heavily for many years. But it seems like Fincher, and I think this was initially written by Fincher's dad, in the 90s, like they have very much, like, it feels like they kind of made their mind up that her side of the story was more true, and that Wells didn't really, because in this movie it doesn't really paint Wells in a good light at all. We don't see him an awful lot. He shows up and he has a really bad temper, and then that's all we really see of him. And yet you're made to empathize with not only you meant to empathize with Gary Oldman throughout the movie, but you're also kind of, I feel like it's telling the bigger story of screenwriters in general kind of not being fairly
recognized,
treated and recognized for their work and their contribution. So yeah, it definitely feels like they wanted to, the people behind Mank certainly felt like that side of the story was more true than Wells having anything to do with it. From the screenwriting point of view, I don't think anyone would take away the rest of the movie him having massive influence in. But when it came to the script, they seemed to agree that, that at least for their story, that he wasn't going to be the one that had really any part to play in it. And I think for me that acted as a little bit of a barrier because they're, quickly name dropping people, and I was trying to quickly find who was this and what was that, and it kind of at times was a little bit of a barrier for me following along what was happening. When it came to some of the Hollywood executives and stuff like that, you kind of like, you could, smarter people probably got it no problem, but I felt like the movie almost required a working knowledge of all of this beforehand to really, really get it, and I didn't have that working knowledge. So I think that put a little bit of a barrier for me, like truly enjoying it. I would recommend it to people who I know appreciate movies that look amazing. I don't know if I would recommend it to people just as a movie that they'd want to watch, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, I agree with you. This is a movie that requires a bit of knowledge and kind of I think passion for the movies is the world, like love for the movies. And I've got love for the movies, and I've got knowledge, and I know who Louis B. Mayer, who David Selznick is, who Orson Wells is, and so on. But it still was a barrier, and I don't think it's a good thing, in general, for the movie to do this. So this is Mank, available right now on Netflix. What do you think we're gonna rate it on?
Ooh, I've got it ready.
Got it ready. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock.
I'm gonna go with 3.5 because I'm tempted to go 4. I'm not gonna lie, because I do think it is phenomenal looking. Like, I have a friend that has a TV very similar to mine. And I immediately texted and I was like, hey, you gotta go. And I didn't actually say to him, you need to watch Mank. Because again, I was like, I don't know if I cared that much about the movie to recommend someone watching the movie. But I was like, you need to check out some of Mank. It looks incredible, and it's graded for Dolby Vision. And that's what I mean by like, hey, it's a good movie. It is enjoyable enough, but I just don't know if I could really say to people, you can't miss Mank.
No, I agree. 3.5 stars is fair. I think if you tilting towards 4, I was actually tilting towards 3.
Okay, fair enough.
And so 3.5 stars from the Blockbuster Spot, and you can check our ratings on the Letterboxd, and where we have our account. This is letterboxd.com, and the Blockbusters podcast. Oh, the Blockbusters is actually the our account over there.
Mank, it's Orson Wells.
Of course it is.
I think it's time we talk.
What is it the writer says? Tell the story you know.
Hello, everyone.
Make yourself to home, Mr. Mankiewicz, or shall I call you Herman?
Please, call me Mank.
Mank.
Mank. Mank.
Mank.
This is Herman Mankiewicz, but we're to call him Mank.
Mankiewicz. Herman Mankiewicz, New York playwright and drama critic, turned humble screenwriter, Mr. Hearst. This is a business where the buyer gets nothing for his money but a memory. What he bought still belongs to the man who sold it. That's the real magic of the movies. Thunder, lightning, blood, fire, religion.
Help! Someone save me!
All in one film.
That's director proof.
That's why I always want Mank around.
I hear you're hunting dangerous game.
God bless William Randolph Hearst.
Ready and willing to hunt the great white whale?
Just call me Ahab. Do come in.
At this rate, you will never finish.
You said 90 days. Well, said 60. I'm doing the best I can.
I've put up with your suicidal drinking, your compulsive gambling, your silly platonic affairs. You owe me, Herman.
Who do you think you are? You're nothing but a court jester. What I want to know is what you think of it.
It's a bit of a jumble, a collection of fragments that leap around in time like Mexican jumping beans.
Welcome to my mind, old soul.
Perfect. Conor, I think we've spent so much time talking about black and white movies. We need to start talking about something much more colorful.
Sorry, I was reading. Someone put a line. I'm reading some reviews on Letterboxd here, and this is Adrian Balboa of Rocky.
Yeah.
So incredible that she's on Letterboxd. Especially because I'm pretty sure she's dead, which is amazing. The character Adrian Balboa. This is David Fincher says, imagine I don't release a movie for 6 years and then come back with a biopic that's the sexy kind of boring. And I think that line is absolutely perfect for this movie. It's the sexy kind of boring.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's talk about The Mandalorian.
Yeah. And Mandalorian. So let's geek out on The Mandalorian. Spoilers from the beginning. If you've not watched any of the series 2 and you don't want to know stuff, maybe just pause it for now and come back when you watched episodes. Oh God, I still can't get with the numbering. You know, this is the chapter 13, chapter 14. I think this is episode 4 and 5 or 5 or 6.
They have names, so let's just say it's the Jedi is chapter 13. That's what it was called, the Jedi. And
the Jedi.
The most recent episode then, chapter 14.
And the tragedy.
The tragedy, yeah.
Yeah, so, I've got it over here in front of me. Yeah, cool. I don't know why I'm gone blank. So, previous episode has finished. So, previously on The Mandalorian. So we were discussing 2 really good episodes. The episodes when Mandalorian actually meets some Mandalores, and then goes back to the when he meets Carl Weathers, right, over there, and he actually is informed where to find the Jedi. And the next chapter is the Jedi. So I was thinking, going into this episode, we're going to see Mando landing on a planet, going around his business, looking for the Jedi. And maybe towards the end, we're going to actually meet the Jedi. Bullshit! Yeah. Here comes the Jedi. First thing you see.
This a little bit here.
Sorry?
I'm going to preface this a little bit here with saying I think I finished the last episode we recorded talking about Dave Filoni.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm pretty much, I am happy and willing to eat my own shit after that. Because I did say that, like, hey, I think Filoni is sometimes a little bit like too much of the Star Wars guy, you know, and it's too much references and stuff like that. He directed this episode. He directed episode chapter 13, The Jedi. And yeah, you're right. Straight out the bat, like, we got them white lightsabers coming through the mist on this planet, like the kind of fog, and oh boy, did I shit my pants.
Yes.
Oh boy.
I mean, this was something out of the, like, wow, okay, it starts with lightsabers come into an action, and we see the new character in the series, but it's not a new character.
No, she's not. In
the universe. So this is a character called Ahsoka Tano, and she's played by Rosario Dawson, and she's a Jedi. First time she appeared, I'm gonna now surprise you. She appeared in the movie, the animated movie Star Wars Clone Wars. She was the apprentice, Padawan of Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah.
Actually, Conor, you're gonna now look at me like, how do you know this? Because I watched the movie. I watched it on Disney Plus. It is atrociously ugly, but is action from the bat, and I loved it. So this is the character, the Ahsoka Tano, and she's attacking a town. There's someone in the town that she needs some information from. And actually on that kind of a big wall, there is a character, there's the actor, I'm looking at him, I was like, I know him from somewhere. And it's Michael Biehn, who played the Terminator, who played in Aliens. It's so good to see him actually back in this film, in this TV series. So later on we see, obviously there's a lot of fighting in there when Ahsoka Tano kind of cuts out the troops. Then later on, like the following day, we see the Mandalorian arriving to the planet with his little friend, the child, and he kind of goes to the town, and they give him another because he's a bounty hunter, they gave him a thing to do, like, do you want to hunt a Jedi for us? And he's like, oh, it's not gonna be easy. And then the kind of the woman that's in charge, she shows him like, oh, this is what you will get in the exchange, and it's a big. How do you call it?
It's a spear. It's a
Yeah,
Beskar.
It's a spear made of Beskar steel.
Mm-hmm.
And Mandalorian, obviously everything kind of works in his favor, because he's there to see the Jedi anyway, that they tell him where to find the Jedi. And then we see him kind of wandering, and then he actually comes across the Jedi. They start a fight, and we see this was something I didn't know, that Beskar steel is actually you cannot penetrate the Beskar steel with the lightsaber.
No.
And that was like, ooh, that's interesting, because normally lightsaber cuts through everything.
Yeah. Which is like...
But I'm talking like a geek now.
One of us. Look, that's obviously a setup as well. Like that was them being like establishing, the importance of Beskar, because we hear a lot about Beskar, and we hear like it's mentioned a lot throughout the series, and we can see that even if you go back an episode when he meets the other Mandalores and he runs out with the kind of like thermal detonators, and he's getting shot, like his kind of position in that group was to be, like in a kind of gaming term, is to be like the tank, like he's the big thing that can take a lot of damage. And the reason is his Beskar just like is deflecting bullets. So like they've done a lot of work to basically establish that Beskar is somewhat impenetrable, and this was them kind of being like, and also lightsabers can also not do it as well. So it was really cool to see it as she like attacks him, and he uses his kind of gauntlets to block it, in what was even itself a really cool little fight.
Yeah. And once they start talking, because obviously very quickly Mando doesn't want to fight with Ahsoka, and he tells her that he's here for a different reason. He was sent by someone who she knows as well. They start talking, and she very quickly recognizes that this little green fellow is someone someone of his race she's seen before.
Yes.
And this is the kind of key point of the episode, when she kind of sits with the child, and they kind of look at each other, and they are talking apparently.
Yeah.
And she learns the child's name.
That's right.
Did you expect that, Conor? Tell me, did you?
I felt like we had to get it at some point. I don't think I really necessarily predicted that it was going to happen here. And I think that has been a bit of a theme this last few episodes, is that like they've moved at a very rapid pace, but in a good way. I did not expect, as you said, like to land on this planet and immediately show the Jedi. You would assume that based on some of the previous episodes and based on other TV series, that something like this, you're going to get it in the last like moment or two, right? You're going to get 5 minutes at the end of the Jedi appearing to save the day or to get him out of a sticky situation. But no, they just open right away with it. And I think that this is another case of it as well. And even with the next episode, like they just arrive straight away at the top of this mountain, which I totally took me off guard. I was like, I did not expect to get here until maybe the finale, where we got the child to the mountain. Yeah. But they just literally open the episode with him like arriving to get the child onto the mountain. And it's like, okay. Like, they are just sort of being like, all right, well, we've got more of a story to tell maybe than you thought. So
that keeps like... Yeah, the series keeps surprising the viewers, keeps surprising me, keeps surprising you. I think many people I've kind of like listened to other podcasts discussing this, like we don't know where this is going. We've got 2 episodes left, and this is going to be super, super interesting. I mean, what I wanted to say about this episode, The Jedi, not only we learn kind of the name, but we also kind of see the bond between Mando and the child as being tighter and tighter. We've seen that, but right now we kind of like we see that he has a problem with letting go like of the child, and he's even kind of said to train the child, be the person that's gonna help the child to train. But in this episode there is so many visual beautiful stuff happening. I think this looks like almost the throne of blood. And it looks like the Yojimbo. This is Kurosawa's films, like the samurai films, and it's just like the the shape of the town as well, the towers, the bell, everything in there kind of reminds me of those old films of Kurosawa. So incredible visual stuff. Second one is the fighting in this as well, because Ahsoka and Mando go to the town to fight with the troops, with the robots, and obviously with the kind of the main the woman character and the Michael Biehn's character. And it's incredible how they kind of shoot it. They shoot two things in the same time, and you hear the women fighting over there. Like you can hear the Beskar steel and the lightsabers, and it's just incredible episode. And what like Ahsoka says at the end, she's like, "Oh, go to this planet, and at this planet there will be a place when your little friend can communicate with the other Jedis." Yeah, we learn a lot of story from where is he from, like how he survived, and this is all tying up to the very the prequels, actually, the prequel trilogy. We never see him as a character, obviously, but he's from the same place where the Star Wars episode 2 and 3 actually showed Coruscant, and where kind of all Jedis were killed. When the Empire was in a was actually the Republic was transitioning to the Empire. Yeah.
So just very quickly before we move on to the next episode, then, one of the obvious, very huge inspirations of Star Wars was, samurai movies, and Japanese culture, like everything from the lightsabers to the kind of clothing that they wear. To how even if how Obi-Wan and Darth Vader first kind of fight, it's not like this big kind of crazy fast saber fight, or how really any of the fights in the original sort of trilogy pan out. It's not full of lots of lightsaber tricks and people jumping around the place and things like that. It feels more like old samurai movies where there was more tension, and it was very powerful and deliberate blows with your weapon instead. And then you also had a lot of kind of references to Western movies and gunslingers, very much like Han Solo, and the Tatooine itself feels like something from a sort of Western movie. And this is one of the cases, I think, where Dave Filoni, and his obvious, sort of love and passion of Star Wars really worked out, because you mentioned the two battles happening, and it is those two genres at the same time. On one side of the wall, you have this Japanese garden, and it's these two women, and the way that they're fighting is deliberate, and it's tense, and they're watching each other, and they're making very deliberate strikes. And then on the other side, it's a showdown at sundown.
Western, right?
It is a Western, right? It's who just draws the quickest. And they don't hide it. They don't shy away from it. But it just works so perfectly together, this juxtaposition. Yet both of these things are entirely what Star Wars is kind of built in. It's so much of its DNA comes from both of these genres. And to lean into it in the way that they did in this was just so wonderful. The like you said, the sound of the lightsaber and the Beskar, and you switch back, and then you have Mando's hand just kind of resting above his holster, just ready at any second, and and they're chatting to each other as they listen to it, and it just was such a stylistically cool episode. And something I've complained about with The Mandalorian before was I feel like we just didn't get to see anything new from the Star Wars world, and yet the previous episode where we have the Mandalorian on the sea and in the sort of fisherman's town, and then here when they mention going to this planet, this forest planet you assume to arrive, and it's going to look like something like Endor, from the original movies or whatever, and it's going to be lush and green, and you arrive and it's just desolate, and the trees are destroyed, and it's gas almost everywhere, and it's foggy, and it's miserable looking, and it just, again, it's like, oh, this feels like somewhere I haven't actually seen in Star Wars before. It feels like somewhere different, at least for sort of live action tentpole Star Wars. I'm sure if you watch all the cartoons, you're taken to all sorts of environments that you don't normally see, but in the main sort of stuff that we see, this felt like somewhere new, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, it was a great episode, I think, and obviously that every week this show keeps on getting better and better, keeps adding more stuff, and you kind of keep surprising. And I thought to myself, okay, the next episode is probably going to be one of the filler episodes, when you're like, oh, maybe he's going to kind of wander off somewhere and not get to the point where he needs to be. But no. First of all, off the bat, in the episode, the tragedy, Mandalorian lands on the planet where he's supposed to land. Obviously, there is a bit of jokes at the beginning. He's using the child's name actually to tease him out. He's actually practicing the Force with him. Super cool. And then he lands on the planet. Then he goes to the kind of place where he's supposed to be, and this turns out to be the portal, some sort of portal. Then I love it when he kind of turns his back, comes back, and the child is actually right now in a state of trance, and he's kind of like beaming out somewhere. He's like, what the hell is happening? He's like, oh, the kid, come on, stop this. He tries to get him out. Obviously, the kid is protected by the force field. He cannot move. So that was super interesting. This episode is 32 minutes, and this is the first episode that I actually watched with my girlfriend. Like, she was like, she didn't mind me just watching it, and we obviously see one character that was kind of hinted in the previous series that's coming back. But then there is also, I'm gonna quickly jump on, there's a big shootout with the stormtroopers, and I didn't know who directed this episode, until the end, because then at the end you got it revealed, right? And I was just watching it, and I was like, and my girlfriend says to me, "This is quite violent for a Star Wars," because you could see essentially the character is smashing their heads, and there's plastic or whatever the helmets are made of everywhere, and they kind of lay down like they doing the flips. And I was like, this is. Yeah, I agree. This is kind of, like up there. And then I see, okay, Robert Rodriguez directed this episode, and this was like, okay, this all makes sense. So Robert Rodriguez, one of the directors that, alongside Quentin Tarantino, is one of those kind of homeschooled movie makers. He made was it Desperado? No, what's the name of that? El Mariachis. Right, and then he made Desperado with Antonio Banderas. So
From Dusk Till Dawn, was that also him?
From Dusk Till Dawn as well. So he's
Spy Kids 1, 2,
Spy Kids, yeah. His style is very, very kind of up there. Like you can see, like, okay, this all makes sense right now. Like, this is his style of movie making, but. I think I want you to talk about like the character we actually see in this episode that appears.
So yeah, once he puts him on top of the mountain, and then you see that he's like meditating, and he's obviously doing what Ahsoka Tano said would happen. Like, put him on the Seeing Stone, and the child will reach out, or Grogu, as we discovered his name, and will reach out, and he'll decide his own path. So that's obviously what we see happening there. Like, he puts him on the Seeing Stone, and then we get him kind of like talking to the other, presumably like other Jedi or something like that, or reaching out. And then the camera pans as we see a ship entering through the clouds, and I just shit my pants at this point. So I did.
Second time.
Yeah, the ship is Slave One. All right. And
what is Slave One?
Slave One is Boba Fett's ship, so very famous from the original trilogy. Boba
Fett is meant to be dead.
That's right. So Boba Fett dies in the Return of the Jedi, and it was always somewhat controversial in a sense, because it was very unceremonious. It was kind of cartoony in a way. I think if I'm remembering correctly, I even think they use like a Wilhelm scream when he dies. And it's on Tatooine, and he accidentally gets hit by Han and falls into a Sarlacc pit. where he's presumed dead then from that point. And the start of this season of The Mandalorian obviously teased his return, again, because we've seen this sort of, there was a suggestion of him in the previous season, and then at the start of this season we open up with someone else wearing his armor, and then we kind of see a person at the end of the episode as well, if you recall. And
for
he's
a brief second,
he's wearing the Jawa stuff, or not the Jawa, sorry, the Tusken Raiders. He's wearing like their garments, so he's obviously been hiding as a Tusken Raider for however long it's been on Tatooine. But that was the last we got of him, and you knew that he was going to make some appearance then throughout the season. But for him to kind of enter in Slave One, which we haven't seen or heard of, you would assume Slave One long gone, even though it was an iconic and cool ship. To see it coming back was like, oh fuck, that is awesome! Like, what a cool way for him to make an entrance. And again, you're not quite sure what he's doing here. You don't know. You just know that he's here, and you know that they're not going to play around the second time and have, it's someone else that gets out of his ship or something like that. You're like, no, this is going to be him. And even the way that he kind of appears as over the kind of hilltop when Mandalorian goes to kind of like greet him, he looks very much like Obi-Wan appears to look in the first movie as well. Kind of, as a Tusken Raider almost, like with the brown hood up and everything. Yeah. And then we established then that he just wants his armor back. They haven't ever really clarified, I think, whether his armor is also Beskar. I have to assume that it is, obviously, because they kind of suggest it here, but they never really outwardly say this is Beskar. They kind of they come to agreement that he'll help the passage of the child to wherever the child needs to go in exchange for his armor. One thing leads to another, and the stormtroopers arrive then, assuming that we know that he's being tracked. We know that the Razor Crest was being tracked. And then I think with the title of this movie, it would suggest to you that, something bad happens. And we find out what it is as the Razor Crest gets destroyed, gets absolutely blown to fucking smithereens. And it is heartbreaking, I'm going to be honest with you. Yeah, because the Razor Crest itself has become a character. In the show, right?
Beautiful ship. It's a beautiful ship,
and it's like it has its own personality, and we've seen it kind of get destroyed and beat up and rebuilt and so on and so forth. And it's it has its place, and you do get that sense. It's more good acting from Pedro Pascal, where after they finally kind of defeat the stormtroopers, he glances at like the hole where where it was,
the ashes.
And you can just tell he's devastated. Like, he's like, oh fuck, my
Dang
ship,
Ferric.
Dang Ferric. And so eventually we do see Boba Fett finally coming back in his full armor.
That was super
spots
cool.
The armor, and not only does he come back, but the thing about Boba Fett in the original trilogy was that he always looked badass. He looked so cool, but he was always just kind of there. He never really did an awful lot, if you remember. He doesn't do an awful lot. He just was so kind of cool and menacing, and he was a bounty hunter and all that sort of stuff. So this here, there, like, as another thing, was like, okay, we're going to take the time now to kind of justify all of this sort of years of hype around Boba Fett and, intrigue around him, where he just cleans these motherfuckers' clocks. So he does. Like, he beats the shit out of them before he puts the armor on, and then when he armors up, he just is in, like, fucking god tier mode. He's using little rockets on his knee. He misfires his rocket on the back, but manages to bring down both of the ships. So cool. It was such like a great sequence, and it was just all action. They were just like beating the shit out of everyone. And again, we've seen the Mandalorian kind of be that tank where he comes in and he's just like absorbing like shots. He's not taking any damage from them, but he's getting pinned down and he's helping protect. I forget her name.
Fennec Shand.
Yeah, thank you. She, who we've seen in season 1 and has kind of like partnered up now with Boba Fett.
Yeah, that was a good relief the reveal as well. Like she was seen dead,
Yes.
in episode I think 5, and she was also a cool character. And then she's back. She's back with Boba, who saved her life and kind of repaired her stomach. But I think the kind of big reveal in this episode is that there is a massive spaceship, which is Moff Gideon's spaceship, and on that spaceship we have dark stormtroopers. That's what they called, right?
Yep, dark troopers. Yep.
Dark troopers, and they were kind of hinted in a previous episode for a moment, and then we see them in action. So there's these are like flying cyborgs, kind of Iron Man style. And after all the stormtroopers have been kind of killed, Moff Gideon says, "Let's send those guys," and they go down and they take the child. And this is there's two tragedies in the title, right? One is the child is being taken, the other one is the starship is being destroyed. And we see actually the child in, it's just like very interesting scene when he's essentially fighting stormtroopers. He's like almost he's using the force to the kind of ability he was not using it before that much. He's essentially then throwing them left and right into the walls, and this kind of is showing that the meditation, whatever that meditation connection was, that probably unlocked something in him. I almost waited for him to say something, like in kind of Yoda style, that he says first words or something like this, but nothing like this happens, spoiler. So interesting. Also, we see the dark saber. So Moff Gideon goes with a dark saber next to the child, and kind of like, this is the toy, but this is not for you, not yet. Very kind of upsetting episode. I saw a lot of people like who watched it and I was like, no, what happened? But this is the way to build the drama, and we have 2 episodes left, and I think there will be a lot of stuff happening in those 2 episodes. We
Given
don't
how fast
know.
we've moved.
Yeah, we don't know exactly. Like we know definitely. I think Rick Fukuyama, right? He's gonna direct one of those episodes.
I think so. Yes.
And we don't know who's going to direct the other, whether it's going to be Rodriguez coming back, or maybe, I don't know, Taika Waititi is going to direct, or whatever. I think this is going to be a big, the big stuff's going to happen. I've got a feeling, Conor, based on the stuff that I kind of like watched, read, listened to, I think we're going to see another Jedi by the end of the series. There's going to be another Jedi that's going to help to get the child from Moff Gideon. That's kind of my theory.
Well, we're gonna you can almost be sure we're gonna see Mando and Moff Gideon fight in a Darksaber battle, because he has not only did we establish he's wearing Beskar armor, but we also now know that the Beskar spear, that the only remaining thing, along with the little kind of top off the thing, the ball, are the only 2 remaining things really from the Razor Quest. So it's almost a certainty that there's gonna be some sort of like fight between the 2 of them that will use all of this stuff that they've been setting up. I think one thing I quite like what the show is doing this season, when you look at it in conjunction with last season, and then you consider the fact that they are calling it, like chapter 9, for example, starting season 2. It's not really season 2, episode 1. Like, they're continuing these chapters on as if it's one continuous story. Is that like we may well see Ahsoka Tano again, but not until next season. I feel like much in how that we teased Boba Fett's return almost 10 episodes ago, I guess, right? If you go back to the middle of season 1. So I really enjoy the fact that this story is like building and building out throughout this sort of well-established Star Wars universe, but yet it still feels like a smaller story. It doesn't feel like, we're quite there at the scale of what's happening with the, the sort of big tentpole movies. So, we got a little bit. Well, we're seeing now like the kind of teases to how the First Order comes around, how Snoke maybe comes to be, how the Emperor kind of gets sort of reanimated, I guess. So like that's essentially what it seems to be that the child is the play here is with Moff Gideon. I can't think if there's any other sequences throughout. I have to imagine Timothy Oliphant. We haven't seen the last of Timothy Oliphant, for that one episode. I feel like he will have to probably make some return. Where we got a tease of Bill Burr returning, who was in one of the episodes in last season. So they're building this out as if it's a bigger, longer story here, and I think that's working really, really well. And I think what it's doing, as we spoke about before when we mentioned when we talked about like Rogue One, for example, and what Rogue One did so well is that it makes that first movie and the first trilogy better for like when it finishes, because it adds just little bits more to it and kind of decorates it a little bit and lets you know this was happening at the same time or kind of in between. And that's what's going on here. Like they are going back and saying, well, we know that it's a point of contention that Boba Fett died and it kind of unceremoniously. So like, we can tell a story where that didn't actually happen, and it doesn't feel like we're just retconning something. It feels like, no, like there's just a more to his story. It didn't finish, in the 1980s. That's not what, like, there was more to it, and we have this platform now where we can tell these stories that people are going to pay attention to. And I think that's where the show is coming into its own strengths, is that it occasionally dips too far into sort of like Star Wars lore and paying homages to stuff, but then sometimes it just gets it right, like seeing Slave One coming down through the clouds. You're like, oh, okay, like that's amazing. Whereas they very could have easily made that not be cool.
Yeah. So overall, like you heard me changing probably from, talking about the first season at the beginning of our discussion, kind of like, oh, it's fine, but to start of a second season being really good and then getting better and better. And even I started geeking out and watching some of the animated stuff, just to understand a little bit more like what's actually, behind those characters, where those characters are coming from. I'm not going to go dig with you very deep into like what's not right. Maybe something could have been better, based on did Ahsoka Tano she met Yoda, but also there was another Jedi that's from the same species as well in the cartoons, but she didn't mention it. Now I'm not going to dig into that, but I think this is something for the fans to discover. Overall, even if my girlfriend said to me when we finished watching the episode, The Tragedy, she said, I don't mind watching more of that. That's the biggest statement you can hear from someone who actually doesn't give a shit about Star Wars.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. Like, Enya is the same. Like, she did not care about Star Wars at all. Like, really, like, prior to us going out, like, it couldn't have been so any further off her radar. And now she is, like, actively cannot wait for Fridays to watch The Mandalorian. Like, she's so into The Mandalorian. And I think that, like, that was sort of the brilliance in the child in Grogu, is that like it made this new character that nobody really knows, and yet it feels accessible. Like, because Mandalorian himself, like, there's all of this kind of like history and lore and that kind of nerdy stuff surrounding it, whereas like the child was more like it's a child and it's lonely and it's lost, and where the mission is to get it back to its people or something like that. And then you can make it cute and you can make it funny and all of these things, but what it is accessible. It's a point where people can jump in and feel really invested in a character so quickly that gets them into then starting to care about what are Mandalorians, like that's what I think the kind of brilliance of the child was. It was making the rest of it accessible to people. I can't wait for next week. I actively look forward to Fridays now. I gotta say, like, I'm like,
Friday is not only the weekend, but it's also the new episode of Mandalorian. So The Mandalorian is available on the Disney Plus platform, and we can't wait for it to conclude. Actually, I wanted to watch more. Can you make episodes longer than 30 minutes, please?
I just hope that WandaVision can come out of the gate really strong here. Like, I hope that they kind of learned from, producing this series, what people are liking from it. And that they can go, all right, WandaVision should look like this. Very, very excited for it.
Great. Conor, it's been the longest episode ever.
Jesus, it is.
But we always try to entertain everyone that want to join us. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being patient and staying with us for that long. If you enjoyed it, please let us know. If you didn't, also tell us. We are online. Yeah, we want to hear everything. We are online.
I don't care.
I'm at rdefaultad on Twitter or on the letterbox at Radox. You can find us online at theblockbusters.net or on Twitter at blockbusterspot. I will link all the places where you can find us in the show notes. Our theme music is by Scott Holmes, and you can find more of his work at scottholmesmusic.com. Artwork was created by Conor Boyle himself, and episode was edited by myself. The podcast is available on Apple Podcast, Overcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, wherever you're listening to your podcast from. Next week, or in the near future, we'll be discussing the best Christmas movies of all times, or maybe just our favorites. I think Conor is gonna be geeking out on this quite a lot. And before Christmas, we're gonna deliver the best TV shows of 2020. Will Mandalorian be there on the list? Who knows? You need to stay tuned and listen to our episode. I'm not sure whether we're gonna review Wonder Woman before Christmas, but definitely gonna come back to it because I really want to watch it in the theater.
I have no idea whether places are going to open here or not in time for it to play here.
But maybe it's gonna be easier for you to fly to US, subscribe to HBO Max, and watch it in 4K. And that's it for today. Thank you for staying with us. Enjoy the rest of your day, night, or morning, whichever time you're listening to. Stay safe. Take care. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
And like that, he's gone.
I'm just rewinding myself.